different UFO formats. Different functions. July 17, 2019. As UFOs are being commented on, people have wondered why different formats are being viewed. The article below was written by Danny Silva, Silva Records website. Different UFO formats. Different functions for each ship. The UFO/UFO events of the Navy brought new UFO formats to be discussed and studied in the public arena. Research may also be taking place behind the scenes. This diagram was displayed during the end of the season of the unidentified series of To the Stars Academy, TTSA. The formats that were reported during the events of USS Nimitz and USS Roosevelt are amazing. Now we have a new twist on the classic cigar format, now known as the Tic Tac, on the flying saucer or some form of it, the little circular Foo Fighter or orb, and then a somewhat new and intriguing description of a cube in a sphere, or a square in a circular aura. Almost everyone who followed recent UFO news in the last year and a half heard about the Tic Tac UFO event off the coast of San Diego. We found out during Jeremy Corbell's interview with Commander Dave Fravor that there were L-shaped appendages on the side bottom of the Tic Tac. Corbell: and then you mentioned to me that they were L-shaped appendages underneath the vehicle, the Tic Tac. Fravor: yes, when you're looking at this, you know, it goes about, I do not know, 20%, 25% down, and kind of run out like a little L, right, like a little down a slope of 90 degrees. They almost look like small feet coming out of the background. They can be antennas. Corbell: the two forms of L went to one side or the other, or were the two symmetrical? Fravor: yes, I believe they were both going right. So we're looking at it, you know, it goes to the left side, so they went down and pointed to the right side. They did not go that far. I mean, the way they zoom in, they're too close to the object, you know, zoom. Different UFO formats. Different functions. 1. A recreation of the cube and the sphere during the unidentified of the TTSA. Jeremy Corbell was also the first person to record the cubes and spheres. Danny asked if he had sources other than Chris Mellon when he talked about what is now known as Roosevelt/Jimble events on the East Coast. Jeremy replied: Danny: yes, very separate. Something not reported yet is that many of the 2015 East Coast AAVs were similar to what you would consider a Scout. Many appeared as squares with a spherical aura around them. So David Fravor reiterated these comments when he described this format. One of the planes in the squadron almost hit one of them. It was 100 feet down next to it. They were in section and came down from the side, and they came back and said that it looked like a ball with a cube inside it, like a square that has an aura around it. Since writing that blog in January 2019, Chris Mellon and Lieutenant Ryan Graves have also made the record describing the ship. Chris Mellon talked about the cubes on Fox Radio. Thanks to UFO Joe for the transcript. So what Lieutenant Graves and his companion Lieutenant Acoin, who were sent to the East Coast with an F-18 squadron, some of the vehicles they saw and described in the New York Times article were spherical. They were perhaps 6 to 10 feet, 1.8 to 3 meters in diameter, and they are transparent, like a soap bubble with a black cube inside, and the edges of the cube are touching the inside of the bubble. Now, Harris Faulkner: again, no motor, no nothing, no, does not look like wings. Chris Mellon: no idea of something like that. If it was a balloon full of helium, you know, that would make sense. But then, how does it fly? How does this maneuver? Then these things are observed going to hundreds of miles per hour, sometimes near supersonic speed, and very small, of course, to have any kind of pilot on board these things. One last point you may find interesting. These things are sometimes seen flying in formation. Harris Faulkner: like birds or as our own fighter jets. Chris Mellon: yes, you know, a V-shaped formation. Lieutenant Graves: in the unidentified series, it was basically a cube inside a sphere where the tips of the cube touched the outside of the sphere. When the Jimble video was first released, many people thought it was showing a classic record. Since then, we have received more information that highlighted the fact that it may have been slightly different from that classic form. Here is a conversation that occurred in the first season of Unidentified, Episode 4, between Lieutenant Graves, Lou Elizondo, and Commander Fravor: Elizondo: there are parts of this video that we can talk about that are not here. Let's go through this. Graves: so this object was significantly larger than the ones we're used to seeing. The ships in smaller cube format were essentially flying in a formation, and then behind it was the object as you can see here. It almost looks like a gyro, right? The way it moves, the points that come out from the top and the bottom, what appears to be a disk or at least a central mass in the object. Then those objects were moving in one direction, the 5 at some point, basically just turned around, with some sort of lightning bolt, a spin, like a unit and beginning to fly in the other direction. Right now it's practically where you see this video, where they're off the scene, and it's just this one that stands still. Elizondo, that's why they refer to them as there's a whole fleet of them? Graves, yes. So there was not a whole fleet of these big ships, there were just all those little guys. And then there was the only object we'd ever seen before, which was significantly larger. Later, Commander Fravor says, Fravor, that's important. Now we are looking at something that can stand still on a geographical point, at 120 knots of wind, can spin around and then can accelerate above the supersonic. Now, thanks to unidentified, we know there were 4 formats during the Navy events, and now we know the Go Fast video format. Narrator, in the 2004 Nimitz incident, Navy pilots stood face to face with a tic-tac-shaped object. 10 years later, the Roosevelt pilots said they found 3 different ships. A cube inside a sphere, a large UFO-shaped disk, and a small round object captured here. Formats of ships are also drawing attention elsewhere. According to Rich Hoffman, a board member of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, his group is currently working on a comprehensive study of formats over time. In writing this article, I wanted to talk about the differences of the ships seen by the Navy, but this was not the main point I wanted to highlight. The next logical question that many people ask is, what are the purposes of the different ships, not just during Navy events, but the different ships witnessed over time? Apparently, these questions and ideas were passed from hand to hand in the Pentagon and possibly even studied there. Let me point out this quote from Lou Elizondo, now long forgotten, but very successful. During a joint interview with MUFON's Elizondo and Jan Harzan, exactly 1 year ago in July 2018, George Knapp asked Jan, I'm wondering if since the Tic Tac video came out, if MUFON went through your files to look for similar types of ships. Have they appeared before? You've heard the argument that, UFOs seem to evolve over time and they're always just 1 or 2 steps ahead of our aviation or aerospace capabilities. Is there any evidence that something like Tic Tac has been around for a long time? Harzan's response was not noteworthy. However, after Harzan spoke, Elizondo got into the conversation and I have not stopped thinking about it ever since. Lou Elizondo, I'll say, George, there was some speculation and some theories within the department about the formats of these ships, and what I'm going to say is that it was the conclusion of many within the organization that the spacecraft format was a result of the ship's function, and I'll leave it that way. But if it's a disc or a tic-tac, or a cigar or a triangle, it may well just be a function of the ship, of what is its intended purpose. George Knapp, so they're not building something to look cool and have fins like a Cadillac. They are building something depending on any technology, the physics of how it works. Lou Elizondo, correct. I do not think Mr. Elizondo would have said that if he did not think he had credibility. There are some very big topics from this comment. 1. Government members study or at least think about the different formats of UFOs. 2. They actually concluded that the formats were due to the function, thus answering the question that so many members of the public asked. As we have seen many times, the answer to a question only leads to more questions. Important questions still remain. Had these observations been made randomly by members of the government, or did they study the functions of the different formats of the ships? If so, what was the depth of this study? And perhaps the most important question of all, what were these different functions? If information and even answers like these are contained in the ASAP/AATIP database reports, commented by Harry Reid, I can only imagine how much it would help in the disclosure if they were released to the public, apparently overnight.